coming. I'm Molly Starback, Director of the Office of Postdoctoral Services, and I'd like to welcome you to the second panel discussion in our series on the academic job search. This series is co-sponsored by my office, by the Duke Career Center, and by the Graduate School. And upcoming events include negotiating the job offer, that's a popular one, that is on November the 2nd. Gender differences in academia and politics in higher education, that's one next week. Do y'all think there are politics in higher education?
No.
Okay, you don't have to go to that one. For dates and times, you can go to the Postdoc Services website, or if you're on the email list, of course, you're going to get them that way. So I know that many of you have questions that go beyond the interview to negotiating, because they kind of go together. But like I said, we will have a negotiating panel on Thursday, November 2nd, 9 to 10 a.m. in this same room. And so for today, we'll keep the questions to the interview. And what we're going to do is have questions for an hour, and then we'll have some open networking so you can ask the panelists your specific questions if you want to. And I would like now to thank our panelists very much for joining us today. Yay! And we have one more coming. Anne-Marie should be joining us soon. So our panelists today are Damaris Lorenzo, who is Assistant Professor of Cell Biology and Physiology at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And Damaris, up until recently, was a Duke postdoc. So congratulations.
Sitting where you are now.
Yes, yeah, she really was. Anne-Marie, who will be joining us shortly, is the Professor and Vice Chair of Pharmacology and Cancer Biology. Amanda Randalls is Assistant Professor of Biomedical Engineering, and John Willis is Professor of Biology at Duke University. So I'll ask the panelists to introduce themselves and briefly talk about how they've been involved in the faculty process, whether recently doing it herself, as in Damaris' case and Amanda's case, or being on interview panels now as part of a faculty search committee. So, Damaris, would you like to start?
Yeah, so thank you for inviting me here. So I started my lab at UNC just about a year ago, actually. A week ago was the first year anniversary, so I used to be a Duke postdoc in Van Bennett's lab, first in the cell biology and physiology department, and then in biochemistry. That was a postdoc I did for 6 years, and I had a great experience. I liked it so much, I liked the area. So my lab is in the cell biology and physiology department at UNC Chapel Hill, and we studied the role of the cell skeleton in cellular bioenergetics and also brain development and connectivity. So I always knew that I wanted to have my independent research program, and I started interviewing at the end of my postdoc, and I know I was in your position over a year and a half ago, and I know what it takes, and I know how stressful can it be, but my best advice is to start preparing for it ahead of time and identify what you need for it, network a lot, and then also try to think about the process, think about what it takes, and think about how to prepare for it as early as you can. So that's the best thing. My experience is mostly interviewing in research, Tier 1 research and intensive universities, so I don't have a lot of experience with small colleges or more teaching dedicated institutions. And also, I had a little bit of experience being on the other side as part of search committee last year, so I can tell you a little bit about that part of the process, although my experience is limited.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Anne-Marie Pendergast in Pharmacology and Cancer Biology at Duke.
Thanks for coming, Anne-Marie.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, we were just talking about how you've been involved in the faculty search process.
So I've been involved at all ends. When I first started, actually I should say that I didn't have to do a lot of work because my mentor was a very great mentor. So every time that he went to a meeting, he'd talk about my work, and everybody wanted to interview me, so I didn't really have too much trouble. So it's important to get a good enthusiastic mentor that is very supportive. Yeah, and he was really great. This is Owen Whitty at UCLA. And then once I got the offers, I just, decided that Duke was my best fit because of that combination of basic science and medical school and the very collaborative environment. And once I arrived, I've been involved in searches at every level, from the assistant professor to the full professor level to the dean of the medical school, so at various stages.
Yeah, so I'm Amanda Randalls. I'm in biomedical engineering. I'm in my 3rd year now, so I just went through this pretty recently. And now I've been on 2 search committees in the BME department, so kind of seen both sides, but still pretty new to it.
I'm John Willis. I'm in biology, which is arts and sciences, not in the medical center, so I've got a little bit of different perspective. But I've been here since 2000, and before that I was a faculty member at University of Oregon for about 8 years, I guess. And so I've obviously interviewed myself, but I've been on search committees, and I've of course been a member of our department, and every time we have job opening, it's not just the search committee, but basically as many faculty as possible meet with the candidates. So I've seen, you know, assistant professors all the way up to searches for chairs within our department, and then, higher levels too.
Thank you. Can you tell us a little bit about how the interview process is structured? So do most institutions start with a screening interview by phone or by Skype nowadays, and then invite you to come to campus? How do you winnow down the pool of interviewees?
I can tell you that we, in our department, actually, we interview in person. We do not do any Skype or anything like that. And the idea nowadays is to actually, you put the ad out and you get like 300 applications. And the idea is to try to reduce the number by the interest of the department, what the department is looking for. But maybe more important is what I just mentioned about the mentor. Like, our chair or members of the search committee would get on the phone and talk to the people that they know that are mentors or associated with the various candidates to try to ascertain the degree of achievement and independence. Because sometimes when a person is part of a very successful large lab, you don't know if that publication or that work is the idea of the individual, or is it just a reflection of what the mentor, the PI is thinking. So it's not really their work, but the PI's work or the lab's work. So you want to gauge that by talking directly to the people that know the candidate. And then once you know that, then you start inviting people. We usually have 2 visits. The first visit is a more formal visit. So nowadays what we do is to have the formal lecture followed by a chalk talk, sometimes the same day or the following day. And then if the person is interested in us and we are interested in the person, we invite them for a second, more informal visit where they get to meet additional faculty and look at the area, or maybe even bring their spouse or something like that. That's how we do it in our department. But it could be different in others.
Yeah, so I should say, in my department, we do a Skype interview, so usually you get the pool of applicants, 200, 300, 400, depends on the year. And then the search committee goes through their applications and select a maximum of between 12 and 16 in the case of my department. And then they have a screened interview that is through Skype. And then the purpose of that interview is to get to talk to the candidate, just ask some questions so you can put a face on the name and also realize, how enthusiastic the candidate might be about the institution, and ask some pretty fundamental basic questions about their research program, what they want to do in the future, and what they think that UNC Chapel Hill would be a good place for them. And then after the Skype interview, the pool gets narrowed down to 6 to 7 candidates, and those are the ones that are invited for a campus interview.
Yeah, I would say I don't think the BME department does a lot of Skype interviews, but I think they have done some. For some of the positions I had interviewed for, I did have Skype interviews to initially winnow it down as well. And then we do it where it's the 2 interviews where you have your traditional lecture on the first visit, you meet with lots of faculty, and then you're invited back for the second visit to do the chalk talk typically then. Sometimes we might try to fit it all in one visit, but more often we have it in the 2 visits where there's one for the chalk talk, one for the initial lecture and meeting with all the different faculty.
I think there's a lot of variation in the way that different schools, different departments, different universities conduct the interview process. I think especially smaller schools that don't have huge amounts of money to fly people in for interviews, instead of flying 6 or 7 people for the interview, they might winnow it down to 3 or 4 with a Skype interview. So, you'll see a lot of variation. We've done it both ways in our department, but typically we have the formal campus interview is for both the research seminar, the big formal seminar with PowerPoints and all that stuff, and then we have an informal chalk talk, mainly talking about their future research plans, their grant plans and things like that, all part of the same interview. And it's only once the department has come up with the one that they want to try to recruit, would they come back, would that person be interviewed, well, invited back for a second visit.
Thank you. And you just touched on this, John. Could you explain the difference between a research talk, a chalk talk, and then sometimes we hear about a job talk? So
I guess a job talk would be, in my mind, equivalent to the formal research talk. And this is a standard hour-long kind of thing, 50-minute long talk where you talk about your own research. And I think one thing I would suggest, and I don't know if the rest of you agree, is really emphasize not just your past achievements, but where you want to go. And even in that first talk, because everyone has seen your record, they've looked at your CV, your papers, all of that stuff, and what they're really trying to do is hire someone for the future, someone who will be really a great researcher going forward. And so they're looking to see what your ideas are about the kinds of things that you want to do once you get to your own independent lab. So don't put that off just for the second chalk talk. Definitely have a nice section in your job talk. Say, okay, I've told you all of the cool things I've done as a postdoc or a grad student or whatever. Now I just want to show you where I want to go with this. And that way, typically the whole department will go to the formal job talk, and a much smaller subset of interested faculty who are closest to your own interests will go to the chalk talk. But you want to convey to the entire department what you want to do in the future and give the whole department some idea of your level of enthusiasm, your level of interest and passion and all of that, so that they can go away with that impression of you in their mind, which is key. So, yeah, and then the informal chalk talk is often not a formal lecture. You just say, okay, here are the kind of projects I touched upon yesterday in my formal talk that I'd like to do if I were to come to Duke. And they might put it up on the board and say, I'm happy to talk about any of these. Do you guys have any questions? And then usually the faculty will really dive in and say, well, I'm really curious how you're thinking you might go about this, because to me this is really tricky. And so you could get down into the nitty-gritty with a more interested, focused audience.
It's worth mentioning that the job talk is often open for everybody. It's open not just to the faculty, which you guys have probably seen here. Yeah. But it is that one's more open. The chalk talk is just for the faculty members typically. So it'll just be people from, it'll be a much smaller meeting of the chalk talk, and then it's pretty open for the job.
I mean, we don't exclude grad students or postdocs at all, but it just ends up being, with interviewing 6 or 7 people, people get exhausted. And so, they typically will put a lot of effort into going to the big job talk, and then it's only the folks who have a real invested interest in your future research program that will be at the chalk talk.
Yeah. So, what is weighed most heavily by the search committee? The research talk, the job talk, the one-on-one interactions with the chair of the search committee?
I think all of it. Yeah, it's all of it, because you get different information from each part. So obviously the presentations, whether formal or charter, are really important because you get to see how the person is thinking, how enthusiastic the person is, how well they communicate their ideas, and how their plans fit into the future of the department or the university or centers that are ongoing here at Duke. And the one-on-one is really important because, for example, I'll just give you an example. In the last search, thank God that we didn't give an offer to this person, but basically it turns out that this person, one of the candidates that we interviewed the last time, had really a lot of telltale signs that something was not right. So one of the telltale signs was that the person would not ask anything about any of the other faculty or what they were doing. So they were in complete disinterest in what the other members were. You know, wherever they met, even the chairman of the department, there was no question, nothing. And then when they presented their work in the future directions, they were not really doing anything about that particular area. And we were all puzzled, why wouldn't you continue the area that you started in your mentor lab? And it turns out that we didn't give an offer, but UT Southwestern gave them like a $4 or $5 million offer. And what happened is that the paper that that person had done was flawed. And when Southwestern got a hold of that information, they withdrew the offer.
Wow. Yikes.
Yeah. So it's like, there was something uneasy. It's like, you can kind of tell, sometimes it's hard to put into words. So you want to have a person that is conveys a feeling of not only professional, but honest, and also engaged on what other people are doing, because if you come to a department, you're going to be collaborating with those other people in one way or another, so you want to have a feeling that you're part of that group or that community.
And like everyone you meet with the one-on-ones will like typically, like we do it where like everybody emails their feedback, and like, that does, like when we see the final report of which one we want to go for and how we're moving forward, like people's comments from those one-on-one meetings do make it into that and really do end up being part of the discussion. And it's like at some of the schools they might set up a lunch with like graduate students or their postdocs, and those graduate students are also asked to give feedback. That's right. And if like, you know, in some cases if you're not interested in talking to the grad students or kind of rude to the grad students, that will actually play into it. Yeah,
hugely.
So it is like everybody you're interacting with will have a chance to give feedback, and it is actually, it does all play a role.
I mean, yeah, this interaction stuff, you might think, oh, that's kind of weird that that's weighted so heavily. But you have to think of it that, you know, they're hiring you for the long term. I mean, ideally, you might stay there for 30 or 40 years, right? And so, I mean, really. So they don't want someone who will be a jerk, who will be not a good scientist, who will not be a good teacher, not be a good mentor, etc. And so, yeah.
Okay, you said that interaction is the biggest mode of...
No. It's not the biggest. No. But it's important.
Because, you know, in scientific field, you understand some people are not very good with interaction. You have to agree on that.
Yes, absolutely.
They can be smart.
Often the faculty who are doing the interviews are the biggest problem.
That's why you ask everybody, the students, the postdocs, they all provide feedback to the department, because obviously you want somebody that is very congenial, but obviously one of the most important things is the field, the project. Is this person really driving these ideas? Is he a pioneer? But you want to have somebody ideally that also can relate to other people and be a good mentor, because at least for the university, you want that kind of, ideally, somebody that can be an example to other people.
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, we're not hiring scientists who are going to be stuck in their lab by themselves, cranking out, you know, world-class research. That's not what the job is about. I mean, that's a big part of it, but it's really, this is a university. It's an educational mission. It's a mentoring thing, and so. Yeah.
I would say to put a lot of focus and emphasis on the research talk, because that sets the stage for the successful interview. It's really hard and difficult to recover from a poor performance in a research talk, and especially because not everyone is going to be sort of evaluating your performance and giving opinions about the research you did and the research you want to do in the future, but not everyone is going to have the chance to meet with you or go to the shop talk. So I think that's really important, but having said that, don't let your guard down, because at any moment you're going to be evaluated, and you're going to get feedback or give feedback about your performance at any stage. The students during the dinner with the search committee in any of the individual interviews. So just make sure that you're comfortable, make sure that you're genuine, that you show interest, and you're gonna learn a lot, especially during the lunch with the students. You're gonna learn things that perhaps are gonna help you making a decision that you might not learn from talking to the faculty. So that's a good opportunity to take advantage of.
I guess I would just add, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, another question. So in that case, what's your opinion, what things that you will suggest for someone who have the interaction impairment? Because I have friends who have a speech impairment.
Oh.
So
those are not important.
No,
those are not important.
In that case.
Yeah, that's not important. I think that we've had people that have, some disability, and we don't really care about that. It has to be more the being, as you say, genuine and interested, and showing that you really care about your science. But if you care about your science, you want to care about the people that are doing the science, whether it be with you or in the lab. So that, otherwise, I've never seen a successful person that is complete chaos with everybody around. And that's your recipe for disaster.
I mean, we're sort of, there's some tricky issues, right? Like some people are naturally gregarious and outgoing, and others are shy and more insecure. And so the hope, now I don't know how successful it is, but the hope is that that kind of stuff should not matter. Certainly shy people are outstanding mentors, outstanding scientists, but they may not project themselves as charismatically as someone else. And so I think, at least there are good intentions on the side of the faculty to not let that kind of stuff get in the way. And often people who are real showboats and show-offs, and that's going to be a very negative thing. Yeah. It's the honesty, the genuine passion and interest in the field that people are trying to evaluate, not superficial personality stuff. But of course,
you can tell that. Like if a person is they're interpreting the data and making these grandiose claims, so it's like you can tell right away that is not what you want. You want somebody that is very critical, that when you get a conclusion, you're very careful on how you extrapolate that.
Very skeptical,
yes.
And very, I would totally. The other thing I just wanted to say is that you have to realize. So we said don't let your guard down and all of that stuff, but you shouldn't feel like people are there to judge you in a negative way. You have to realize that the faculty has wanted this search for several years. They have gone to the mat with the administration to let them have this job line, right? There's been a lot of discussion about what kind of person the department should get. When, by the time they actually select people to interview, there is a palpable excitement in the department, and very curious and hopeful about that all of these candidates will pan out, and that it'll be a really tough decision to decide who. So it's not that they're there to be like it's not like that at all. They very, very badly want this search to succeed. They want to get someone who will be just ideal, right? So that's where they're coming from. They're not coming from a negative judgmental sort of place. And that's...
And also from your perspective as a candidate, you should be looking for departments where you have a lot of collaborative feeling, like where the atmosphere of the department is a positive environment rather than people, sniping and negative. And you can tell that by talking to the faculty and see how happy they are there, or the students. Like I remember when I went to some university, top university, and the students told me, oh yeah, I cannot talk to you about what I'm doing because my mentor is afraid that if you mention it to the other person down the hall, that person is going to steal our idea. And I said, I'm not coming here. So it's like you can tell just from interactions yourself whether you would like to go to a certain location or not. Yeah.
How much are you supposed to know, or should you know, or bring up about the the research programs of the faculty you're interviewing with.
At least in something, like you should be able to ask a few interesting questions about that, to be engaged on what you can ask them to tell you what the most exciting project is, and then you can ask questions, because it's kind of like nice to have a two-way street conversation rather than just one-sided. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. If there is API or multiple professors within the department that the research programs are really close to yours, then in those cases you should know a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
So you could maybe not propose collaboration, but have a more interesting conversation that could be beneficial for everyone. But at least to have a basic knowledge of the type of research that is being conducted in the department.
Like you'll get your schedule probably a couple days before you go, or you know who you're having your individual meetings with. So even just Googling a little bit, just like if you walk in and someone does something very similar to you and you've never heard of them, that would not be the best. So at least knowing like the kind of field that they're in, what their areas are, and you can like even just make a couple notes on your schedule. So before you don't have to memorize it, but then like as you're walking to the next meeting, just look at it, see who am I meeting with, what are the things I should know about them. If you know that they're on the search committee, it's good to make a note of which ones you're meeting that are on the search committee. But it's useful just kind of, you should get a schedule at least a couple days before you get there. And if you haven't, you should ask whoever's putting your visit together, just so you can look at like who you're meeting with and trying to prepare. And if there are people that would be really great for collaborating, it's always, like you don't want to tie your research to somebody else's and say like, I'm only going to be successful, but in your chalk talk, if you can mention like these are the different kinds of people, like these are the directions I'm going in, this is how it would work in this university and why I would be successful there. It's always good to kind of make references during the chalk talk and kind of see like this is how I would fit in. And in the BME department, we tend to have like one slide in the chalk talk that does what class would you teach in our department. So like just like before you're giving that talk, I don't know if every group would do this, but you don't spend a lot of time on it, but like one slide is like, look, I could teach something in a core area. So you mentioned a core class you would teach, and then your elective that you would design.
You mentioned about learning about the culture of the department, and you said one of the things you can ask professors is if they're happy.
Yeah.
Are there other questions that you can ask professors without being too forward and still getting information as to what the culture is like there?
Yeah, you should definitely ask about what kind of mentoring is there for their faculty. Like, for example, some chair of the departments, like the one that I mentioned, they don't, this particular place where I didn't go, the chair didn't really care. They just very famous, traveling around the world. But the most successful departments are the ones where there are mentoring committees. So for example, many departments here at Duke, I know my department in immunology and other departments, they have a mentoring committee of at least 3 faculty members for each new assistant professor. So what happens is that this mentoring committee meets at least twice a year, sometimes more often, to help the assistant professor make sure that they're going in the right direction. And we set this up such that they can also get feedback from grant writing. Like, there are formal grant writing programs, but they won't really know the science. So the main thing is that once you finish your first draft, you send it around, and you have to have faculty in that department that are willing to put time, because it takes a lot of time to do these reviews and to make sure that they will provide assistance and help the person succeed. So if there is no such thing, then you really don't want to go there. So you want to have like that kind of environment.
Yeah. So how important are the reference letters?
Oh, they're really important, because those are the people that have worked with you very closely all throughout. So they are the persons that can give a best evaluation at every level, like scientific, personal skills, organizational skills, all that kind of stuff should be reflected in there. And so they are really critical. So don't ask for a letter from somebody that you don't have a good interaction. You want to get the people that are the best supporting for your work and your future. Yeah.
And so when is it a good time to maybe bring up if you have a spouse or a partner who might also be looking for a position at that university or in that area. Like, do you wait until you get the offer, or do you bring it up during the interview?
No, I think that you can mention it if they ask you at any time. We usually, it might come up during the dinner with the faculty member, but more importantly is during that second visit. I think during that second visit, I think that you can ask if you can bring your spouse because the person wants to look at the area, and we actually help if the spouse we can help them find a job. We'll do that at least with our searches. We have always helped with that. But I don't know about the other.
And I keep saying that was my big breaking point. So I think because it was like I wasn't going to take a job or my husband couldn't get a job, so I brought it up earlier than maybe if it's not like that was my main I wouldn't have taken the job if not. So I would bring it up on the first interview so they knew that was an issue, and it was never counted against me. They just immediately started helping, trying to suggest where he could get jobs. I think I mentioned on the last one, they flew him out without me even here. Duke flew him out and tried to get him they had informational interviews, they tried to help and do whatever they can do. They started doing that once the offer happened, but we had started discussing it on the first interview, but it's a matter of what the biggest point is for you.
I think it would be extremely important to mention it during the first interview if your spouse or significant other is also trying to get a position in academia, because then the institution have to wait whether they have the resources to be able to do so. So if you do it early, perhaps those resources are available and they can be open, or then you don't waste your time or they don't waste their time. It's not possible.
And they need time if they want to work with other institutions in the area and try to I've never seen it be a negative. It's just they want to be able to help you and they need the time to be able to help you. And if you tell them way at the end, they're not going to be able to go work with another institution and see do you guys have an opening as well? Have you already filled it? And but I haven't seen the negative side of it.
I think it can be in the past, I think more than now, and also at places that maybe don't have the resources that Duke has or whatever. It can be, I guess I would, if you really want the job and you are flexible with what your spouse or whatever could do, you may want to wait a little bit, until after the first interview. But if it's, something that's a make or break thing, you should let them know, and they can begin to try to put things in place. So.
I still got offers in cities where he couldn't get a job. It didn't stop them from giving you an offer, but they all were working with us earlier.
Any question?
What's the right number of places to try to apply? Because I can imagine you lose your focus at some point, but you don't want to apply to one place. So.
700? Well, once you have your application together, you don't have to necessarily tailor it to every place. So once you have it together, then there's no real cost to applying to a ton of places, is there?
I think it's a numbers game,
Yeah.
some sort. So don't apply to places where you cannot see yourself being there. That's a waste of time for everyone. But any other institution where you believe they have a strong research program, or you think that you'll be happy, or at least based on the knowledge that you can gather from the website or by talking to people who work there, you should apply. You don't need to tailor your application 100%. Sometimes just make sure that you don't make a mistake in the cover letter.
Yeah.
Just make a little bit specific and try to identify areas of expertise or synergism that you can highlight in the cover letter, but the rest is going to be pretty similar. It doesn't hurt.
Or you can also find out through your mentor or people that are, that are leaders in a particular field that you're interested. You can ask them to give you recommendations sometimes, for example, we have had a knowledge that somebody was going to be on the market, and we hadn't even put the ad up, but we basically reached to that person because we knew the mentor was in the National Academy, and so there is a lot of networking that you can do as well to kind of reduce the number of places to apply. So you should have like a different tiers, like places that are really top places, kind of like backup places, and just enough so you don't have to start a search the following year, so you can extend enough. Yeah.
And let me mention that the preceding discussion was on the academic application process, so that's archived on the YouTube channel. So if you have specific questions about that, you can go review that. So getting back to the interview questions, so how do you ask about work balance, life issues diplomatically? Like if you have kids or you want to have, or whatever, you know, like, is there a way to say, how hard am I expected to work here, or is that completely out of bounds? Or?
I wouldn't phrase it like that.
No, because in science it's really not work. It's kind of like, you know, it's like it's not being in a company. You have certain meetings and whatever, but you pretty much can make your own schedule. You have a lot of flexibility, but it's mostly like, you know, it's like a hobby. Like I can work 7 days a week and I'm perfectly happy, and I have been doing that because I'm finishing up a grant, but basically it doesn't really matter. I think that, and I have a daughter and all of that, so it really, you can ask, I think the easiest way is to ask other faculty members at dinner, what do they do? Like for example, what is their support staff? Like when I came, I remember Joe Hyman and his wife, they had kids and they had already done all the work for me because they had already found the best places to put the kids, so I just did the same thing. So just like, you know, so it's really, in a place like North Carolina, it's much easier than, let's say, New York, where things are easier, like in terms of cost and availability. But certainly that in academic science, I don't think that's a problem. For me, it's never been a problem, but it's more a problem in a more regimented environment, like a big, you know, company where you're supposed to have a certain output and whatever. Here, as long as you have grants and you're doing your job and you're teaching and you're doing all these other things, it's fine. You know? So it's not that complicated.
And
I think like the meals and the informal times are like a good time to bring those kind of questions up. Like they often have breakfast, they'll have lunches, and like the dinner is a great time to kind of talk to people, and it's a good setting to ask about all the informal, like, you know, family questions, or where do they live, what do they do, like that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to like, are you happy here? Do you like living here?
Yeah.
Yeah, where do you live? What is it, you know?
How long does it take?
Yeah, do you have to long commute, or, you know, find out about the restaurant scene or the music scene or whatever. But I would totally echo this thing about academia being just awesome, because you have, you're your own boss essentially. And so, you know, there's been so many times where I've had to go pick up kids from school who were sick, and, you know, I had just total flexibility. If I needed to stay home and, you know, for whatever, it's no big deal. So, yeah, you have a tremendous amount of flexibility in setting your own schedule and everything, but of course you have to get grants, and you have to write papers, and you have to have mentoring and teaching and all of that stuff. But it's not, you know, 8 to 5 or 6 or whatever. It's whatever you do. So,
I think that people sometimes like we always talk about, you know, the academics versus biotech. I have had students that have gone to either one, and some of them are happy and some of them are not so happy in the biotech world, because it is not like that you can just do whatever you want and wake up one day and decide this is what I'm going to do and I'm going to make this discovery and whatever. You have to do in a more formal setting. You have to do what your bosses tell you. And we have a very nice scientist that came to give a talk recently, and he had his own lab for his whole life, and then went to work for a big pharmaceutical companies, and this is the first time that he actually has a boss, and he has to respond to that boss at any minute when he receives a phone call. Like, it doesn't, I mean, not like 5 minutes, it has to, in the moment that he gets a phone call, because he is like a third one in command. So he is under these orders, and it doesn't matter where he is, he has to get engaged and immediately feedback. So it is a completely different world out there. So it's a big shock for him.
So when is it appropriate, or is it appropriate to let the search committee know that you're interviewing or have offers elsewhere? Is that a good thing to do? Like, hey, other people want me, or?
Towards the end, yeah. Like, how do you do?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of when it's good to, like, as soon as they know you're wanted, it makes them want you more. It's always good to tell them. But I think I told them pretty early. I don't know how, I don't remember how I worked it into conversation, but definitely, like, if you have offers, you want to tell them, especially if the offer has a date that you have to get back to them by is useful to make them tough to turn around a decision. But if they know other people have made you offers, that's going to help you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say if you have other offers, it's good to mention. You don't necessarily, don't feel obligated if, you don't have to tell people where all you're interviewing. They should, you don't have to say, I have all these other interviews at these specific places, but it's okay to indicate, I do have other interviews coming up, and sounds like everybody wants to talk to you. Yeah, I don't know the best way of working it into the conversation, but it's useful to do if you can.
Especially if you need to make a decision in one of those offers. And because interviews happen at different times in different institutions, so there are institutions that they are done in January. So at UNC, they were interviewing until the end of April. So if you have an offer on January, and maybe you are the third or the fourth person who is going to interview at Chapel Hill, then you need to sort of let them know, so they might maybe be able to have your interview a little bit earlier, or if you are the top candidate or they really like you, they might make you an offer, even before considering.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if you've got an offer from someplace that you like a whole lot more than this place, you might say, oh, actually, thank you for inviting me for an interview, but I've got another offer, and you guys use your money to invite someone else. So there's no point in stringing them along just to make a good bargain or something like that. I don't think, because it's not you against the world. They've got priorities. They want their searches to be successful, and they don't want you to drag them along, toying with them if you have no intention of going in the first place.
Any other question?
So for the offer giving process, on the standpoint of the search committee, we have a lot of things to juggle, right? You have whether the candidate is ideal or whether they have an offer already. So will that affect you guys to give a decision? For example, if they are all great and they have offer, or if only a few of them have offer, so the number of offers given out, would that change accordingly?
Usually the search committee in the department is constrained. They can't really give an offer ahead of time, but they may try to really speed up the process once all the interviews are over. I think, if they hear that you've got all these fancy offers, they might be really sad if they think that you would prefer to go there. So, if you really are interested in that place, but you have offers elsewhere, you might as well tell them, I love Duke or whatever. I do have other offers, but please, let me know, as soon as you can, because I'm really interested in, Duke. So, you can, you don't want them to be bummed if it's, but if you, it sort of depends on what your goals are, what you're most excited about. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying you're the top place. If you gave me an offer that would allow me to get my research going, this is where I'd like to be.
I had some where they, I told them I had an offer, I had a deadline, and they made sure instead of talking about me on the April faculty meeting, they made sure to talk about me on the March faculty meeting. And so they, when they were running out, I don't know how it exactly went, but I know that they definitely moved it up a little bit to make sure, just because I did have a hard deadline of when I had to respond. So it can be useful. So even if they, weren't sure they were going to make a decision in March versus April, they knew we really should if we can talk about it. We've had all of our interviews in already.
But if the school that you're talking to or interviewing with is sort of not in the same league as the places that you have other offers, you want to, if you really are serious about this place that you're going to go interview, you should tell them that you're serious about it. Otherwise, they may assume that you prefer the higher tier places and that you're just sort of stringing them along.
Yeah.
So they have very few slots to interview. They don't want to have the search go belly up. They want to end up with a candidate that they're very excited about. And so they'll begin to get wary if they say, oh, you've got all of these high-end offers and we're a small liberal arts college someplace not very desirable to live. They wouldn't want you to stick with them and negotiate the bejesus out of them just so that you can crank up your dollars on your offer at the flashy place. So don't do that to places.
And if there is a reason that you were really excited about the small school that they might not realize and you have flashy offers, make sure you tell them.
Yeah.
Because they might not invite you because they thought, oh, they already have these crazy R1 offers, but maybe your family's from there and you actually really want to live there. There could be some reason. It's good to be very upfront about that, because I've definitely heard cases where they just assumed they wouldn't have a chance with you, so they don't even bother.
Right.
Yes.
What if you've already accepted an offer and then your dream school comes and says they want to interview you? Does that happen? Is it okay to take the interview?
That seems really bad to me. I would say one thing to be aware of is there are basic things when you go out for tenure, even if you switch and go to your dream school, the people that are going to write letters from you or for you are coming from the other schools, and you may be burning a lot of bridges there.
I mean, before you even started, you just accepted the offer, and then the following week, your dream school offers you.
I think if you've accepted, I've never had that.
So the question is, why did you accept that? Is that because they gave you a deadline, or?
Yeah, like a deadline.
Okay,
and
so
you
they
didn't know if you were going to get anything else.
I mean, I've heard of people who, I think it's bad, but you could say to your dream school, if they really want you, say, look, I've just accepted this offer from this place. I feel like I owe it to them to be there at least a couple of years, a year or 2 or 3, and that way you're not totally burning the place, but you're going to be burning through their startup, which is, you may think, oh, everyone gets startup like that, but it's still a significant chunk of change that is putting a huge burden on that university if you're not going to be there. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's just...
I know, some of the small schools, I had friends who had offers that had deadlines in January to say, we know you're probably going to get better offers.
Yeah.
We want to make you commit. And there were schools that did actively do this. But then you knew you had a job offer in January, but I don't know how it would have gone if you accepted it and then said no. I don't know.
Because you're pretty much blowing their search, right? They've already cut loose everyone.
No, I've never seen that situation, so.
I actually had a classmate who was in that situation, got an offer from a smaller school, and went ahead and accepted the offer. I think it was, like you said, in January or February, and it was not even a month or 2 later, he got the call from superstar R1 university that he had his heart set on, and our mentor, who's famous, said, don't you dare. You've made the commitment, that's what we do. We stay with our commitments. You can always go to later.
Right.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, academia is a small world. So.
Doesn't that kind of put you in a pickle that if you know that you have other interviews but not other offers that are coming in January and February, and you have to decide on something or be left without anything?
Well, you can push back on these
You
deadlines.
can push back on the deadlines. We've had actually some of our own candidates saying that they that you're very interested. You can say you're very interested, and you have to go to the other interviews, and if they want you, they'll have to wait.
Yeah.
So I think it's better not to make any final decision. I don't even know if there are legal repercussions when you sign on a document and then you take it out. I don't know what the legal framework is, but certainly it's better to push back, because if they really want you, they should wait. And there is no reason why you have to accept something in January or February when these things are still ongoing. So you should definitely tell them that you're really in the top of my choices, but really I need to wait.
I had one school that, like, I had the offer probably like active for 6 or 7 months, and I kept telling them, like, if you need an answer today, I have to say no. But I still, like, I would come here, like, if we could find my husband a job in the city, and like they left it active in an open offer, which I don't think that's going to be as common, but it does, if they do want you, they have gone through, like you were saying, like 4 years of trying to prepare for this job, like trying to get this application, and they've really worked hard for it. Once they find the one, they will fight to keep that person.
Yeah.
I don't know if everyone would leave it open that long, but it was like, you can push back, and they did, like, they let me keep it open until, like, the day I accepted Duke, I called them and said, like, sorry, it's definitely over now. But they did leave it open for a while.
I mean, we've got a search right now where we made the offer, I think it was in March or April or something like that. And first the decision was to be made like in June, and then it was July, and then it was August, and then it was September, and it's still another extension now. So it's between us and Brown. And I don't know what's happening, but somehow they can't make up their minds. So.
But doesn't that get you feel a little annoyed after a while? Maybe you were thinking that up?
After a while, but I mean, yeah, we really want her to come, and so we want her to be happy where she wants to be. So, yeah.
So I think if you're just honest and not like stringing them along to argue for more money with another school.
And in her case, the issue is a spouse, and so
So somebody had a question over here somewhere. Oh yeah.
Yes, something that I can add to that question. A former advisor suggested that you call your dream university before you sign and accept another offer.
Oh yeah.
You call and say, hey, I want to know your answer, or maybe as you suggested, can you speed up and let me know ASAP your answer before you sign a different offer? That was
that's a great idea.
Yeah. And the question is about the interviewing. What tricky moments or difficulties you had, and how do you handle those in the interview process when you were invited? Maybe something that you didn't expect, maybe some tricky moment that you said, I cannot throw out this process, I really like it. So those moments that maybe you don't expect it, you were not prepared for. And how do you handle those situations?
I don't think I had anything unexpected. It was mostly finding places that didn't fit what your criteria was as a good working scientific environment. Not that the university was not great, but it's just that you want to not only have great science, but also great colleagues, and just you get a vibe or some kind of feeling, is this the place that I want to be? So for example, I did go to some, Ivy League school that was very formal and very old-fashioned and like very stifling environment. So I said, oh, no, this is not for me. So you can kind of feel that just by the reaction of the other faculty, that's what the students have to say. Some places are very structured and very formal, like it's like back to 20, 40 years. So that's not like what you were looking for, in my case, what I was looking for. So you can tell right away, you want a dynamic environment, very forward-looking, very trying to do cutting-edge research, where you actually are given the tools to succeed and to do a good job in your own lab.
Yeah, I would say that exactly was my awkward moment. It was actually when I interviewed here at Duke. So the department, there were two departments, botany and zoology, and they had just been forced to merge into one department. But there were a lot of folks who were nearing retirement age in the botany department, and they all were obsessed with their herbarium, which is where they people go out, collect plants, and press them and then store them in like a library of dead plants. And, you know, I was really excited about the younger group who were much, you know, into genetics and all of this stuff. But lo and behold, on my interview list, my list of appointments, it was almost all of these, you know, 60, 70, 80-year-old folks who were really into their herbarium. And that took me totally by surprise because I wanted to come to Duke because of all these young things, but almost everyone I was meeting with, and they all said, "Are you into collections-based research?" I had never heard that term before in my life. What is a collections-based research? So anyway, that I had to be very enthusiastic about the herbarium. Then I was like, geez, what am I getting myself into? And then I realized, oh, they're all retiring by the time I come here anyway. So lots of opportunity to hire new, younger folks.
So that's good that you came this by.
Yeah. So
it didn't happen to me, but I have seen it happening sometimes in your research seminar. You can be asked questions sort of in a confrontational way sometimes. So that can make you a little bit nervous, so just try to handle that with grace and be polite. And then if the discussion goes on for long, then say maybe we can continue to talk about that and we can clarify that separately.
Yeah, there were a couple, like, during the seminars, and the thing to realize that there were a couple schools where, like, there were, like, a few faculty that apparently did this to everyone, and, like, they all knew where they sat, they knew what they were going to do, but to you felt like you were being attacked, but it was like they kind of ignored what was happening, but you might not realize that, like, everybody actually knows this, they know that the person's kind of just going to be like that, and not to get completely thrown off by, like, there could be random questions, like, random people that are doing that. I would say the other thing, just to be aware, like I had one interview where there were 24 individual meetings within 2 days, and it was just tiring. Like
every half hour.
Yeah, it's like, I think that it's, I don't know, it's a very tiring process. Like I found like when you're switching topics between everything, like I find it when you're doing like a lot of context switching, it's all more, it's like a lot more tiring. So I think part of it was just when you have many interviews, like you don't think about it when you're first getting asked for interviews, you're excited and you might schedule one every week or like, you know, they're all kind of back to back. And by the time you get to the second or third, you need to still be really excited and like sound awake and happy about what you're doing. And that can be harder on the second or third interview. I think being aware, being aware that it is a very tiring process, especially if you're flying around the country and dealing with time changes and all of that fun stuff. It's just something to think about that is a little bit, you might not be thinking about. I know at Duke they did, like the admin who walked me around would show up and bring me coffee in between the different interviews, which was really nice. Sometimes they forget to let you go to the bathroom, like just little things because they have it all very booked, so just...
Like literally every half hour, you switch.
Hopefully, like our assistant is very good. She leaves time for bathroom.
Where it was like, and then like other schools, like every single person was like, "Do you need coffee or do you need to go to the bathroom?" Like, okay,
but feel free to say, "I need to go to the bathroom." And then like you just sort of get in a stall and go like, and then splash water on your face, and then you come out all chilled.
Okay, I want to respect our timetable, so it's 10 o'clock, so now we'll move into the open networking, so if y'all want to come down and get a cup of coffee, a pastry, and ask your individual questions. And we'll thank our panel.